Yes, good Zampola, and a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Kindle. I am the Communication Foundation and the program coordinator for Bhutan Dialogues. So it's a pleasure to welcome everyone to the 69th session of Bhutan Dialogues, both here joining us in person and to those joining us virtually through our social media platforms. So thank you for being part of this growing community of thoughtful citizens, curious learners, and engaged change makers. Bhutan Dialogues is a monthly initiative of Bhutan Foundation. Since its inception, the series has aimed to foster a culture of open and respectful dialogue, encourage critical thinking, and create a space where meaningful conversations can thrive, conversations that help us reflect on where we are, where we are headed, and what kind of society we want to create. So today's session is particularly exciting as we explore the theme AI and entrepreneurship, a subject that is rapidly shaping the future of innovation and business across the globe. We are incredibly honored to welcome our distinguished speaker, Mr. Nicholas Thorne, co-founder of Audos, an AI co-pilot for entrepreneurs, and a general partner at 𝐍𝐢𝐜𝐡𝐨𝐥𝐚𝐬 𝐓𝐡𝐨𝐵𝐧𝐞 is a venture studio known for launching successful startups. And Mr. Thorne is not only an accomplished entrepreneur, but also a teacher, a thinker, and a documenter of startup methods. He lectures at Stanford University and co-authored the book Me, My Customer, and AI. So today's conversation will be hosted by Mr. 𝐍𝐢𝐜𝐡𝐨𝐴, Trustee of the Bhutan Foundation and CEO of 𝐍𝐢𝐜𝐡𝐨𝐵𝐧𝐞. So who brings a wealth of experience in communications, digital strategy, and capacity building work across several international organizations. We are really grateful to have him guide today's dialogue. I'd also like to take a moment to express our deep gratitude to our partners and collaborators. Bhutan Dialogues has always been a multi-partner effort, and this space exists today because of the collective spirit that so many of you bring to this session of sessions. So with that, I would like to formally invite you to open your minds, take notes. We have Q&A following the session, and stay curious. Once again, thank you, and welcome to the 69th Bhutan Dialogues.
Did a very comprehensive job of introducing you, so I don't have to say anything. But I think the only thing that was left out of what you do from Kile's introduction of you is that you just seem to describe yourself as a student as well. At least the Google SEO seems to think that you describe yourself as a student.
That's the word that I am most comfortable with.
Yeah. So, Nicholas, tell us more about that. You know, why do you call yourself a student, and more? And then I guess the bigger question is, what do you do?
Yeah. I call myself a student of entrepreneurship because I struggled in being a part of many different companies to find a word that, kind of fit everything. And so when I tried to come up with one word, the best thing I could come up with was the student, because it felt like it communicated the notion of being curious about how entrepreneurship works. Wanting to learn about it, wanting to share ideas about it. All the behaviors of a student sounded more like the things that I was spending my time doing. And so if I had to just bubble it down to one word, because I'm actively involved in starting companies, I run a company myself, I'm on the boards of companies, I've invested in companies, I study companies. It felt like the word that kind of captured the closest thing to what I hope is my own ethos, which is one of endless curiosity generally, but definitely on this specific topic of how do you figure out what customers want, create solutions, and grow them, and engage with other people in the business of doing that. So at a super high level, that's what I do. In more practical terms, to take one half step back, in 2010 roughly, I started a company in college. I don't want to date myself too much, but that was in the late aughts, and I went and got a job out of college and did the kind of normal thing. But I just always had this feeling I wanted to start things, and so I met a man who's been my business partner ever since. He's about 10 years older than I, and when I told him I just need an idea and I'm going to stop doing this job that I've been doing, he said, "Well, I've got good news for you. I've got lots of ideas. So if that's all you're waiting for, we can start tomorrow." And we didn't quite start, the next day, but pretty quickly, I left kind of the trappings of, a pretty good job, and started my first business.
Which was?
we started a company, it was called BASNO, which stood for Badges with Serial Numbers, and it basically was an NFT concept. We were very interested in digital scarcity and how could you kind of like, project scarcity into an otherwise, abundant, pixel environment. That was, I think, best described as before its time. It's probably more like not worthwhile. And I became passionate, actually, and very fortunately, so many of the things that we did in that experience were wrong. Like just, to me, 100% the wrong way to start something, the wrong reason to start something, the wrong everything. And so,
was the wrong reason to start something that you wanted to start something?
Yes.
Was it? Okay.
I wanted to be in business. And it's not the wrong reason, it's just, it's insufficient. It's probably necessary, but not sufficient.
What are some things that need to what are some right reasons?
Yeah,
then?
so basically my whole life since has been dedicated to that question, so I'll give you my flavor of it. I don't think it is the right reason, but I think I have seen it to be a right reason. So to continue the narrative for 1 second, before I say that, because it'll kind of become it's intricately and intimately connected to the narrative. My partner and I, we turned that first experience into saying, oh, well, we're going to just start many companies. And that became this thing pre-hype, where we really just wanted to create an environment where people could figure out what company to start next. Probably the common feature was my partner had founded a number of companies, didn't want to go hang out at Starbucks, didn't want to go hang out at some venture capital firm where you're not really meeting other entrepreneurial people. You're just kind of sitting there and listening. And so he wanted to create a space, and I quickly found myself to be a kind of customer of this because here I was coming out of this one experience and thinking that I was going to go start something again. And so what we found is for anyone who was evaluating, should I start, what company should I start next and when and how, that there's this kind of what we call in-between time. You kind of have to navigate this space between whatever you were doing last and then the next thing. And it's riddled with adverse selection. There's a lot of pressure on you to get going in the next thing. There's a lot of pressure on you to have that thing work. These tend to be actually pretty negative pressures to coming up with something good. Anyway, so that was really the customer problem, if you will, we were trying to solve, both for ourselves but for other people in this community. And so we built this place pre-hype, and I can go at length about how we did that and why we did that. But fast forward to 2020, we'd been doing it for basically 10 years, and what we had learned, back to the question of what was the right reason, it's maybe not the right reason, but a right reason for us was that the entrepreneurs were building companies where the company was created to help that entrepreneur serve a certain group of customers that they were just really interested in helping. Typically that was because they themselves were either the first customer or were so intimately connected to that customer that they were just, they were a super tight-knit kind of crew of people. The community was really, the starting point of the business. And so an easy example of this is a company that we helped start, and my partner in particular has been, extremely involved with, but it presents for me as a student, it's a good case study. We started a company called Bark. Bark is now a publicly traded company that sells treats and toys to dog parents. That is a very fun business to be in. It's certainly not high tech. It's certainly not whatever, but it's a enjoyable environment. And what they realized over time, and first of all, it was founded from the insight that these were people who were dog owners, and as it turned out, they were treating their dogs like members of their family. They were doing a bunch of things that when 2011 were maybe not widespread, but by 2021, you could actually draw a through line through the theme, which was they were humanizing their pet. They were delaying childbirth, and because of course they were, and it turns out that this is what a lot of people were doing, and the market was growing along with them. And it also happens that dogs are the most Instagrammable thing on the planet because people don't like to see other people's babies, but they do like to see their dogs. And so there was just a bunch of things that helped that business along. But the founding dynamic was Matt and Carly and my partner Henrik were dog parents, and they thought of themselves that way, and they built products and services with that in mind. Importantly, despite being asked time and time and time again, and I remember on the IPO roadshow, we were sitting there and the investors would ask the same question. They say, well, when are you going to launch Catbox? And they say, we're never going to launch Catbox. And they say, why? I say, because we are not defined by our ability to send treats and toys in a box to people. we are defined by the customer we serve. We are defined by the fact that we are a company made for dog parents. And so fast forward, maybe it's not the next product, but like the next big business line that they've created is an airline for people flying with their dogs.
Wow.
So obviously, if you were to look at that in a business case study of like one company and it's got an e-commerce business on the one hand and an airline on the other, you'd say that makes absolutely no sense. But if you define it as a company that serves dog parents, all of a sudden you're like, yeah, sure, that's kind of cool that they understood that. And so that was the architecture of the type of company that we became very familiar with. And so in 2020, the world changed. I think we all experienced that. We happened to be just far enough into what we were doing that we had this opportunity. We were getting some liquidity in our portfolio, and we had the chance to really kind of like sit down and look at what was working. And so we kind of codified that exact thought process. What was it that was kind of common to things that seemed to have just a slightly better chance of success? And for us, that was companies built around a founder-customer fit, a place where you could kind of feel like the founder and the first group of customers were really intimately connected, and where the founder was kind of a authentic ambassador of the group of people that they were serving. And so we sat down and we started writing. And so we wrote a number of essays that actually now provide the backbone for the book we've just published, and it's coming out next Monday. And as it turned out, though, we in parallel got access to GPT-3. And that was very early, and we started messing with it. And I can remember the first time I ever kind of like made an API call to OpenAI, asking it to complete kind of like a framework that we'd otherwise used with entrepreneurs to help them come up with business ideas. And the answers it came back with were kind of, rudimentary and crappy, but you could immediately see like, wait a second, all these things that we've spent time with people doing in the process of trying to figure out what business they should start next are all things that AI can at least help with, because so much of the work in the earliest stages of getting going with something new are there's so many things to do that it's exhausting to have to do them all. So if you could just make it a little less exhausting, you might actually have a few more things like get into the real world. And if a few more things can get into the real world, then a few more real customers can either say this is dumb or, yeah, this is actually really cool. And so we just became passionate about, could you keep like taking portions of the work that an entrepreneur has to do to get a new idea out in front of customers? Could you keep removing the friction. And we were doing that honestly, thinking we would just use that with the entrepreneurs we were working with at Prehype to start these kind of venture-backed startups. And we were very oriented towards starting unicorns and playing the venture capital game, and we understood it. And it's not everything we did, but it was a big part of like how we knew how to grow a business, was to go and raise seed capital from all the VC firms in the States. What became clear to us, though, once we started to make these tools, was that there were many, many more people out there than the 2 or 3 or 4 people we were working with a year that wanted to start something. And in fact, we started to have this feeling that maybe the companies of the future were less these big unicorn companies and were more what we've now referred to as donkeycorns. But they party like a unicorn, but they grind like a mule. And they're one person $1 million a year businesses instead of one person $1 billion a year businesses. And the reason we think there's going to be more of those is because we think that one of the ways that you will differentiate in the world we're headed towards, where AI commoditizes a lot of the job of making new things, is that you as an entrepreneur will have to have, again, a really core community of customers that you're focused on serving, that you're very clear with yourself on the kind of the equivalent question of, we will never launch Catbox because I know that I'm just here to help people who are farmers on steep hills. Like that's what I know how to do, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm obviously making up a shitty example, but
good example.
And in fact, that because of what AI is doing, you're probably going to have to stay pretty niche. You're going to have to stay super focused in what you're doing in order to be different from the big models, in order to be different from all the noise that's out there. And so, anyway. Long-winded way of saying I have basically spent my life now inadvertently on this topic of what are maybe not the reasons to start a business, but what are some reasons around which you can have a slightly better chance of success. And I think a lot of that applies pretty well to the world we're headed to. We'll see if that's true, but at least we're feeling okay about that as being the things we've studied as students for the past 10 years, and we think we can kind of apply that thought process going forward.
Thank you, Nicholas. I think we've already gotten started on this conversation of how entrepreneurs can use AI as well, but I want to put a pin in that, and we want to come back to it. But as a student of entrepreneur, right, I think yeah, as an entrepreneur myself, and more importantly, as a very critical entrepreneur, I like to tell people that I'm a hater at heart. So because I have this hater at heart mentality, the first thing I see is I see the flaws. I have the ability to look for weaknesses. I think, and it's actually a good thing because it makes me very risk averse. But as someone who is a critic of entrepreneurship in Bhutan, I see a lot of issues.
Okay.
And I think it really comes down to defining what an entrepreneur is, and then identifying some things an entrepreneur should do, and some things maybe an entrepreneur should not do. But and that's just me as an entrepreneur for the past 5 years. But you obviously have much more experience. You're much more knowledgeable than I am. So I wanted to ask you, in your learning journey, what is an entrepreneur? What are some good traits of an entrepreneur you've seen around you, and what are some bad traits?
Well, in the start of our book, we actually quote Rick Rubin, the music producer who wrote this book, The Creative Way, which I don't know if you've read. But so Rick Rubin is very famous for having started Def Jam Records, and is if you look him up online, is the least likely person you've ever seen to be the guru to hip hop artists. He does not look like what you imagine in your mind hip hop artists should look like. And he wrote a book, I think it came out about 18 months ago, called The Creative Way or The Creative Act. Really interesting book. And it says, among other things, that creativity is our birthright. There's nothing proprietary about creativity, that it's something that everyone has within them. And I think he defines it as like the act of bringing something into existence, or something like that, or something new into existence. We basically put two extra words on the end of that, and that is our definition of entrepreneurship, which is to bring something new into existence in service of somebody. And so our view of an entrepreneur, and it's certainly not the only version of it, is someone who at its core is serving a customer. It's a posture of service. And trying probably to do that in a self-sustaining way, because if you're really trying to build a system to serve a customer for the long term, well, then you need some model that allows you to continue to do that. And so that's at the core of how we think about things. That's probably very aligned to a lot of these thought processes of really focusing on who you're helping. I think we've probably developed that over and we have lots of other, I can give you lots of other kind of characteristics of what I think might help an entrepreneur, find fulfillment. But I think that's probably like the core definitional characteristic for me. And it probably alludes to some things that we've seen go not so well, that we try to design around from the get-go. And the main one of those is, like what I did the first business I starting something for the sake of starting something, and maybe more specifically building solutions that are looking for problems. There's, in the world we're headed to, but certainly the world we've been in, there's lots of opportunity to make something. And there's, I think, nothing wrong with that at all. Making is thinking, and the more you make, the more you can kind of like start to get your own feel. There's the whole kind of analogy or allegory of the teacher who says to a class, in 30 days you have to hand me your best pot, and then he tells one group to make as many pots as possible, and one only make, and as it turns out, the people who make lots and lots of pots make a better pot because they just spend a little less time worrying about it. So I'm not to say that I don't think it's like worthwhile to make things without any real expectation of who it's serving, but if you want to be in business and have a slightly higher chance of success on the margin, I just think there's a lot more path to fulfillment and risk mitigation, I would actually argue, if you can be clear on who you're helping, what their problems are, and then and only then start to worry about how you are going to solve those problems.
Thank you, Nicholas. And I think the allegory of the pot you gave, I think maybe I'll take the opportunity to flesh it out a little bit more, because I've said this to a lot of my friends also, and it seems to help them all the time. But the one I know is from a photography class.
Yeah, I think that's actually the original one.
So apparently, this professor, when he started this photography class, he said he divided the classroom into two groups, left and right. And to the left group, he said, like at the end of the semester, you just have to show me one good photograph, and then your entire grade is going to be based on that. And to the left group, he said, you have to submit one photo every day. And it's a very powerful example to keep in mind, because a lot of us actually take the left group approach, because we think I want to charge a lot for my services, so I'm only going to do it like once a month, right? So I'm going to be this reclusive genius entrepreneur and then stay on the left side. But then research has repeatedly shown, and I think this comes from Malcolm Gladwell, right? It has repeatedly shown that the group on the right, the one that took one photo every day and then got graded every day, improved every day, they tended to have the better photographs at the end of the semester. And so I think
I certainly think that this applies in entrepreneurship, like massively, and the other kind of little blurb that I would use in there is that action creates information, and in entrepreneurship, information is completely critical, because you're seeking out a path that has not been typically walked before, and so you have to do things that create the information with which you can decide where to go, and so the 30-day I'm going to make this perfect, and it's going to get me lots of information, versus the 1 day, this is completely imperfect, but it's the best thing I can do in 1 day, and I'll get a little less information, but I'll be able to course correct on 1 day basis instead of 30-day basis. I just think that attitude, the more that we refer often, I think we discuss in our book, this topic of kind of entrepreneurial resourcefulness as a key kind of characteristic of someone who tends to have a slightly better experience with new things. I think it's something you can train. It's a mindset, really, which is, how do I make the most out of whatever I've got? But part of that is to focus a little more attention on just doing the best thing you can do within the time constraint you create for yourself, rather than doing the best thing you can do overall. I think is a very dangerous, albeit alluring, kind of.
And going back to what you said about making is thinking as well, right? So that's something I think we can take away from here also. But one question, and before we move on to the AI portion of the conversation, one more question, because I know this is on the minds of all the entrepreneurs watching this right now, is, well, I also want to, start a business every day, try, and then fail. And then by the end of the year, by the end of the month, I'll have 30 failed businesses, and then the 31st might work, right? But a lot of our entrepreneurs, they might feel like, well, actually, I only have one chance at making a business work, right? So in a situation like that, how would you recommend they do this iterative learning?
Yeah, it's part of why I would argue personally that I kind of imagine this like a dartboard. Imagine you got the bullseye, and then you got one concentric circle out, and the next concentric circle beyond that. And let's put a customer profile at the center, dog parents. And the next thing out are the problems that you might be able to hypothesize the dog parents have. It turns out that they don't like going down to the treat store to buy toys, or they're kind of boring. But also they got to brush their teeth, and brushing a dog's teeth are problematic. And they also have to fly with the dog, and they also have, so there's lots of different problems that dog parents have. And then there's many different solutions to each one of those problems. If you want to solve the problem of they're brushing their teeth, well, you could have someone come brush their teeth. You could design some new applicator that is a toy that releases the toothpaste automatically. You could just design a drug that tranquilizes them for 7 seconds. So you can, I have no idea, right? But you can be creative at each one of these concentric circles. And so I think the key thing if you're doing something probably if you're doing something every day for 30 days, it's probably not that you're launching 30 different, completely discrete, businesses. It's probably more that you are iterating at different levels of the circle. And, but it's one reason why at any given moment, knowing who the person is that you're thinking about, who do you imagine as being the person you're designing for, And if you just put them at the center and then feel very free during a period of time to throw away the problem statements and or throw away the solution statements to any of those problem statements, that leads to like a higher velocity of kind of activity. And then on a 30-day basis or 60-day or 90-day or whatever, you might say, well, actually, I really don't like dog parents. I don't know why I did this. They're kind of annoying, and like I'm tired of dogs. Or sometimes, which is probably often what happens, people spend more time doing this and they're like, I just can't be bothered to like talk to more of these people. That's a really good indicator that this is not going to be a good thing for you, But if you spend all that time and then you're like, I really like these folks. I'm really enjoying this, and like I'll just go down for a beer with them or whatever. And when they call at night, I'll pick up the phone and talk to them because I'm actually interested. I'm learning too about how they're taking care of their dog, and I'm making it up. Well, then that's a really good indication that you might actually be spending time in a space that is a good fit for you.
Okay, thank you so much, Nicholas. Now, before we move on to the AI and entrepreneurship, which is the topic of the day, I wanna, because I'm a huge fan of history, so I wanna get your thoughts about this. Where do you place artificial intelligence in the overall grand scheme of history, in terms of productivity enhancing? Is it the greatest tool ever invented after the printing press? Where do you place AI in our human history?
That's a hefty question. I don't think we know. I think it presents as having the characteristics of something that can be as fundamental as all these major technological breakthroughs that we can, like, I don't know what the things are that fire, wheels, printing, glass, networking the whole world turned out to be like a pretty cool idea. When you take all of humanity's written text and you make something that's really good at guessing what the next word should be, it turns out that it's got a lot of application to it. I will share with you after. The best definition of this I've heard, or not definition, but the best discussion of this I think I've heard is a Bill Gates conversation from about a year ago on a podcast where he just kind of talked a little bit more about just how fundamental this is. And he's obviously very out there on, this is a really big deal, and you probably see it. So I obviously I don't know, but I think it can, I certainly think I certainly at least think that it's a full paradigm shift beyond the internet. It feels a little bit, it is the web, and it's very much based on the web, and so it's a continuation of the web. I think we talked yesterday about it, is it kind of Web 4 or actually maybe it's Web 3 actually finally of being delivered, the deliverance of Web 3. But so maybe it can be counted among those shifts, but I think it's as fundamental a paradigm shift as.
Thank you. I guess, you talked about the many applications of AI, and so the most obvious question is, how should entrepreneurs use AI? What are some tools that you've seen, amazing founder friends of yours use AI, and what advice do you have to our entrepreneurs?
Yeah, well, I think the key thing I would just say to start is I think there's that's a place where entrepreneur means lots of things in terms of where people are in the journey and what tooling is most relevant to them at any given moment. And so maybe I can ask back, when we're talking about this, should we talk about people who are already kind of in business and they've started something and they're trying to make it grow? Are we talking about people who haven't started something yet and they're thinking about what to start? Are we talking, are these people who actually run a pretty mature, people even once they've got a big business, they still think of themselves and are entrepreneurs. And so I think the answer to the question changes a lot depending on where you are. I think, that being said, that to the extent that you are not playing with some of these tools that can write code, and that could either be parts of the Claude kind of universe or Replit or Lovable to a certain extent, I think that's, for the moment, the ability to generate code is, and it's masked in lots of places, which is great and fine. It's abstracted away. You don't see the code being written, but that's actually what's happening. I think that's the initial delivery of a lot of the productivity gains of AI. I think people have played with ChatGPT. It's not that having it write your emails is not like a mind-blowing experience, but you can cite, like I understand when skeptics are kind of like, well, okay, like it's going to write my emails, fine, like how much does that unlock? Or it's going to write my memo, like, okay, like I guess I see how maybe that puts people out of work, but when you realize that every piece of software ever created is just a bunch of text, and so if it can generate text for an email, it turns out it can also generate the text that underpins an app. Well, then you're like, oh, whoa, okay. And so even if you're not someone who has ever seen a line of code, I encourage you to just ask, when you're on ChatGPT or wherever the next time you're on it, say, hey, could you please write me the code for a new web app that'll help me count my calories, or some, just find some very quotidian use case. Even if you don't understand what it's doing, you will watch it start to generate code in this structured instead of unstructured basis. You'll go from seeing text that looks like a paragraph that might be in an email to stuff that's got little carets and different words and stuff that you don't understand, but it doesn't, you don't need to understand it. You'll just kind of see it, in a different font in a little black box, and you'll see it. You're like, whoa! I never thought. I mean, I certainly, when I first had that experience a couple years ago, it just had not triggered in my mind that it could do that. And the things that are downstream of that are, what we see a lot of people doing at any version of entrepreneur. Like most entrepreneurs I know, when they're sitting in their company, whether it's got one person or 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people, they sit around and there are things within the company that they're like, oh, I don't like the way that works. I would like to change the way that works. And the way that they have typically changed that is they've called someone up and they've said, hey, you need to change this. Well, what happens if they didn't have to call someone up and they could just change it themselves? And the impact of doing that is not that they've like rendered those other people completely redundant, although they might be. They more so just are like, they're the person probably with the best access to the information of how the whole company's working, both today and longitudinally. So they have the appreciation for how it's come. So, we have this kind of trope, actually, we talk a little bit about this in our book, I think, is like, you think about these big company CEOs. No one ever wanted to become a big company CEO. No one wants to be called a big company CEO. Like, I mean, you do from like a financial perspective, but you don't from like what it is as a pejorative. It means someone who's like sitting at the top of this really horrible decision-making process, who gets pitched ideas and it's slow and it sounds all these things. Like, those are not dynamics that anyone wanted. And in fact, most of those people are really creative. They got there for a reason. Like they have good ideas, and they actually have access to lots of the information. And so if you gave them a tool that was all of a sudden they could say, hey, can you make me something that's gonna, I don't know, follow up with our customers to try to get our bills paid a little bit sooner, because I'm tired of it, and I want to follow up in the following way. I want to follow up. Once the bill is due, we're going to send them an email every hour on the hour until they pay the bill, because that's how I did business when when it was just me. That's what I did. But I've never been able to get other people to like be passionate about following up on bills, because no one else suffers from the pain of not getting paid on time like I do, or whatever, right? I bet you a lot of people have had that problem, right? It's infuriating, but the founder, the entrepreneur, is probably the only one who feels it like really personally, because it's not, it's not just my bank account not getting filled up. It's like, it's frustrating. It's like, wait, I did this thing for you, and now you're not effing paying me on time. So like, you do what you said you were doing anyway. So let's just imagine that you could say to something, hey, make me a thing that will do this, and we'll do it, and I'm gonna continue to maintain that software. I'm gonna be the one who updates the way it writes emails, and now you can do it just by typing. And it's no harder for that person, the CEO of that company, the entrepreneur, it's no harder for them to type to that thing than it was to ask the person to go fix it. That's just like a game-changing thing in terms of how entrepreneurs impact their own businesses, their own trajectory, how close they are to like the metal of the business. They just stay closer to the customer, they stay closer to the function of the business. It's less of all this decision-making. And so all of which is, to answer the question, I would get on Replit probably as the best of these tools today personally. I'd type into the little box the thing I wanted, and I would at least start to experiment with that. And I think that's what people are doing, and they're doing it, towards like all sorts of different interesting applications.
Thank you. I have not used it to write an app, but a year ago I came up with this game based on history. I don't know if you ever played Nobunaga's Ambition on the NES, but
Yeah.
it's this fun game where you essentially have to reunify Japan
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah.
in the 16th
Yeah,
century.
yeah.
And so then I thought, okay, but I could come up with a history game to teach Bhutanese history to young people, right? So unfortunately, because I did not have the capacity to, I don't have a game studio, so
Yeah.
I couldn't do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So at that time, I created a board game,
Yeah.
right? And then we tested it out, and then turns out it's incredibly difficult because, like, when you want to build a fun game, it turns out there's a lot of calculations that need to take place, and unless there's a dungeon master who's happy to do all of it, the game's
very good.
boring,
Yeah.
right? So, but then one of the first things I did earlier this year, after I got a ChatGPT Plus subscription, was to feed that
Yeah.
game language
Yeah.
into ChatGPT and
Yeah.
I said, can you turn it into an HTML code for me?
Yeah.
So I did it, and then after it gave me the code, that's when I realized, oh damn, I don't know what to do with HTML
Yeah.
codes because I'm not a
Yeah.
coder, right? So then I said, what do I do with it? And then
Tells you
ChatGPT
what to
walked
do.
me through
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So now I have a game on the history of Bhutan on CodePen.
Yeah.
So I've not seen a lot of Bhutanese use AI like that.
I think that's like the
basic way we
that's
should
what
be using.
everyone is doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And Claude, I think, is better at that. So if
Mhm.
you're not using Claude, I would try Claude because it will do what you just described, but a little bit better.
Mhm.
And then I think you try a Replit, only because in that case you'll never be told, here's what you have to do. It's just going to go do all the. It will launch a server for you and do all these things. So they've abstracted away a little bit of the, challenge of how do you get that deployed to your customer and all these things.
So I think
But that kind of hierarchy of decision making, I think you'll find. I also just think it's fun.
Yeah.
Most entrepreneurs I know are like people who, on the side are always thinking about whether it's for their own company or for something else, like something. And this is just like an outlet for that energy.
100%. Even when you said, things with doing things within the company, right? So I have a 12-person team, and one of the things that I thought we could be better at was in terms of staying aligned on project management. So where everyone is in terms of the task that they're supposed to do, and obviously Asana exists, Trello exists, but I wanted to see if we could do something like that. So I've been using ChatGPT to help me create an app on AppSheet.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a fun application as well. Now,
Totally.
Nicholas, a fun question.
I was just gonna.
Yeah. Yes,
no.
please. Yes, please.
Shoot, I forgot. I'll remember in a minute.
All right, sorry.
No.
A fun question, Nicholas. Now, I know you've only been in Bhutan a couple of days, but if you were a 20-something-year-old in Bhutan, right, and you understood what was happening in the economy and all of that, and one major thing you need to understand is most Bhutanese don't have access to a credit card,
Yeah.
so we will not be able to get a subscription to any of
Yeah.
these tools, but given all the open source tools that are
Yeah.
available,
Mhm.
if you had to start an AI business in Bhutan, if you were a young 20-something-year-old, what would it be?
What would it be?
Yeah.
I'm going to take a little bit of a cop-out answer to start, and I'll do that while I think about my actual answer. So my cop-out answer is that I couldn't possibly tell you that, and because it would completely break everything about what I've otherwise been saying, which is that you need to
Know the customer.
you need to know
yeah.
the customer, and I don't think my social skills are okay, but they're not good enough to have figured all of you out in the last 48 hours. But we were over at the Fab Lab, super Fab Lab, this morning, and I was very impressed by some of the conversation that was going on around what is distinct to Bhutan, what is the sense of identity here, and the trope for me as a Westerner is like, oh, you're into mindfulness, but there was a couple of things that, farming on steep hills was like a topic we started to get into, like what are the specific dynamics? How does water fall? How do you, if you are a farmer dealing with that, what do you do? I happen to see some poster somewhere about the diversity of mushrooms in Bhutan. So I guess the key thing I would be doing is looking for what do I individually and maybe we culturally have as a distinct point of view that both I'm engaged with because I would be happy to do it for the fun of doing it. I think that notion that you made a history game for this community, the best idea I have right now is I would try to convince you to hang out with me and go build history, find people who want to be the one who runs the history game in their country, and build a community of people building history games. I know that sounds a little meta, but like what you've identified, yes, you know who the Bhutanese customer of that might be, but I suspect there are other people, there's probably like 5,000 other people who are like the guy that is the marketing person, but also is into history, and would be the good like custodian of that idea in their country, right? Like I kind of want to be that person in New York City. So I'm like, I'm your second person. And I think it'd be fun if we went and found more of those people and gave them kind of this little platform on which to design the game, build the game, figure out all the footfalls of like, oh, well, of course you can't score the game like that, you nummy. Like that's not how it works. You got to do it like this. And so that sounds like really niche, right? People who want to make history video games. Are you kidding me? But we could build a really cool business doing that. Like I hope we can do that. Like I'm legitimately interested in that, and I'm interested in it because you lit up when you talked about it, right? Like you were like, oh, like I did this fun thing, and that's like the lifeblood of this stuff. And so, if I were here, I would just be looking for things like that. Like and I think you can't discount. In fact, I think you have to have real conviction that the fact that you came upon that idea is yours and yours alone, but it may well actually be unique or like distinctive, which is that Bhutan has a specific history that has formed your feeling. Like you were the one who, you had the reaction of, oh, I can make a version of this for Bhutan. Like I would never think of that. And that may just actually be because of my upbringing and where I lived and da-da-da-da. And that doesn't mean that it's not a good idea. That now that I've heard it, I'm like, oh, cool, I could do that for Manhattan or whatever. But I wouldn't have come up with it myself. And so I think that sometimes being willing to kind of what we call pursue interestingness, just like follow your own, where are you interested in something that when you tell other people that you're interested about it, that they're like, oh, okay, that, whatever. Like to honest, that's a little bit why I call myself a student of entrepreneurship. Like I'm just really into the, I don't know if you can tell, like I love this stuff. My wife thinks it is like, she's like, stop talking about it, please. Like I got it, but like it's it's a little much. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if that doesn't really answer the question. I think it cops out, but
no, I think that's a good answer because it's very mindful, right?
Yes.
That every market is different, and I think that's something, as I said earlier, I'm very critical of some of our entrepreneurs, and one of the things that I'm very critical about is this lack of mindfulness, because a lot of times they'll see, okay, other countries around the world, they do. My friend in New York is doing this business. Let me copy paste it here.
Yeah.
Right?
So this is like my big pet peeve. So it sounds like you and I would have a lot of fun over a few beers talking about this. I can't stand that, and so I feel very honored to be here and at the invitation of the U.S. Embassy in particular, because and one of the reasons that I was very excited to come is because naively I was kind of like, oh, there's a lot of mindfulness in our, at least very like my very vanilla understanding of how one might think of mindfulness. There's a lot of kind of mindfulness in the approach that says, hey, I have to be pretty clear with myself about who I am, what I'm interested in, what I'm passionate about, in order to be able to like bring that to a crew of customers. And so I'm very interested in how you apply that. I think it sounds kind of ironic that you might find people who want to just like grab things from New York or whatever and copy paste them here. Generally speaking, we have found in our experience, and it's anecdotal more than quantitative, that is one of the examples of a not great reason to start a business, which is if you've identified a market opportunity, if you have kind of an intellectual understanding of, oh, in USA there's 17,000 barbers who cut hair in the following way, and they need software that helps them do that. And you're like, okay, sure. Do you know any barbers? And the person's like, no, I don't know any barbers. And you're like, well, so why, when this gets hard, because it's going to get hard. It's happening. It's coming soon. When this gets hard, what is going to make you persevere if you don't actually care? If you just did this because you're trying to make money? And I think the answer to that often falls short. And I just find that to be a waste of time, because probabilistically most of these things don't work. So you're setting yourself up for 12 months from now, realizing that you spent it wasted, is the emotion that a lot of people will feel. I wasted a year of my life trying to help barbers, and I just don't care about barbers. I just don't. It just doesn't matter to me. And I got beat, and then you're kind of like, why did I get beat by that guy? It turns out that guy like his dad was a barber, and they like their family like livelihood was connected to cutting hair, and they cared about it and they understood it, and they did, so.
Thank you so much. Now, I have one final question, but I want to say after my question, I'll open up the floor. So, audience members, if you have any question, just mentally prepare yourself for it. Now, this question. So, we've had a great conversation on from the perspective of the entrepreneurs at the micro level, right? But I also, like given your vast experience, I also want to hear your thoughts about at the macro level, right? At the government level. What are some things that Bhutan needs to do? Because I'll tell you a funny bit. Now, this may sound sensitive to some people, but I'll tell you a funny bit. In the 13th five-year plan document, it says that by the year 2029, 16 billion 𝐍𝐬𝐜𝐴 of GDP will be generated from the AI sector. And then, so there's a table which compares, like 2029 targets to 2024 real numbers, and it goes, every others, it's like 10% jump, 20% jump, and then you look at AI and it's 0 in 2024, 16 billion in 2029, right? So, like you're an AI entrepreneur. What can the government do in order to make that happen, right? Is it just, do we just get 10,000 GPT wrapper businesses? Do we get 10,000 AI SaaS businesses? Or is there an opportunity for Bhutan to invest in AI servers? Right, compute power, things like that. Do you have anything on this?
I obviously would not pretend to know enough to like shape the policy of the country, but I will say that the conversation I had before I came at the Superfab Lab, I was interested to hear things like, well, one, not a lot of credit cards. Most of AI is consumed via the internet, which roughly requires an ability to pay for things online. So that's not the only way to, your GPT wrappers, which I think you and I could have an interesting discussion about. I might take the other side of what I think I sense to be your feeling, which is I think there can be a lot of value in the wrapper layer, but there can't be any value if people can't transact online. So I think like simple things, and then I heard about how hard it is maybe to start a company or get financing into the country, or get even just customer revenues from outside the country. That sounds like a limiting factor. I buy all. I guess I'd say all of them. You listed like 4 things. My guess is to get to the big number, you got to at least try all of them. I think the case for servers seems quite plausible. I mean, I'm not an infrastructure person, but if you think about the AI stack as compute, obviously, like kind of the data layer, let's call it, with the models and the fundamental models. I was learning a little bit about the work that's being done to try to create a large language model that works in the local, in your language, which sounds really interesting. But so you got compute, you've got data, and then you've got the kind of application layer. I wouldn't discount any of these, but my guess is to get to a big number, you have to be doing something probably at every single layer.
Okay. Thank you, Nicholas, and that's it for all my questions. Now I'll open up the floor. Are there any questions from the floor? I think I'll take one only in the interest of time. Okay, see, as soon as I said one, there's 2. So I'll take 2. All right, Farmer, do you want to start us off? Maybe. Yes, so that our audience can also hear the question.
Lasso. Thank you. It's a wonderful conversation. I wanted to hear your view. So when you go back from Bhutan, I'm sure there will be friends around you who would be asking like, what are the opportunities and things like that. So what are the areas you have confidence so far about Bhutan, where you can actually confidently ask your friends, like, this is definitely an opportunity in Bhutan, in this kind of sector, like in AI, like maybe agriculture, maybe hydropower, maybe all sort of sector application of AI in Bhutan at this moment?
Well, I'll tell you how I've like progressed on that topic since before I got here to today, because maybe I don't know where I'm going to end up, but I'll tell you my journey so far. My journey so far is I came with the very like naive point of view of like, oh, you all are into mindfulness. Like there must be some mindfulness thing to learn, and that's like trite. And I don't think I thought that coming in, and I'm sure there's actually still we met someone over at the Superfab Lab who's working on how do you kind of apply the 𝐍𝐢𝐜 mindset, which is more holistic than just meditating, obviously, and maybe it has to do with your health, but also your financial situation, but also your educational, and could you build products and services that take a 𝐍𝐢𝐜 mindset and apply it to individual? I think there's probably opportunity there, and so that's probably what I came in with. I think that's very surface level, and I'm sure everyone could tell me why that's not such a great idea or whatever. I probably secondly heard about and started seeing like the natural wonder of the place, and you certainly start to wonder, like the hydro makes a ton of sense. The agriculture is very interesting to me, and I heard about a project that they're working on over there where they're helping farmers in a certain way, and so I think that just is a really good example of a place where there's like this endemic understanding of a certain style of doing something. I think the thing that I've learned about so far that I would say maybe is not on the list of things that you said that I am interested in, I guess I'm going to call in the GovTech category, and I guess what I really mean by that is selling to the government. Is making products and services to sell to government. And the reason that may sound, first of all, it's a very unsexy place generally to spend time. But the reason I think I would be curious about what Bhutan's opportunity is there is the ability to export GovTech solutions. And the only reason I would be curious to understand it better, I can't like immediately, send money, nor do I have that much to send, but is that innovating for the government is a very difficult thing to do in bigger markets. The decision making is slower. The access to the actual decision maker is much more limited. The risk feels really high to try something new in New York City because if you, fuck it up, like it's got a huge problem, and so people slow down everything. So there's not that much innovation. Whereas what I heard over just this morning, and so that's just like the thinnest layer of it is like, wait, we're talking to the people in the government who are making the decision around how the police force deals with speeding tickets or something. I think that's fascinating because that's like that's a place where your size is an incredible, and probably your government structure is an incredible advantage, which is you have this intimate customer relationship. It just happens to be between entrepreneurs and government. So that was a place where when I heard it, I kind of was like, well, I've never really thought about that a really small country might have a big advantage, much less one that's thoughtful and technologically creative and has a number of other benefits to it, that it might be a place where you can build these government-focused solutions because you have access to them, you can sell it, you can iterate more quickly with that customer relationship, and then when you get good at it, then it turns out that you're the best in the world at whatever the GovTech thing is. So.
Thank you so much. My question is, since everyone's started using AI, especially as a founder, there's also this gut feeling that you're also talking about, the founder's vision or his identity of doing something. So how do you think we can balance using AI natively, the result it generates, and the gut feeling? How do you balance that?
Yeah. Well, I think when you're in any version of entrepreneurship, whether you're just starting or I would imagine globally and universally, there's this feeling of like, I got to go faster. I got to do the next thing. I've got so many things to do. How do I keep up with the pace? Anything to me that AI can do to like relieve part of the job of the entrepreneur towards like that's limiting progress, that's limiting just like forward motion, I think is something that we should all be very open to. Like if you need to write that email and you're not doing it for some reason, and it can write it for you and at least put you in the position of making some edits and hitting send. If you need a new, ad and you haven't got someone to make it yet, and like whatever the thing is that you're not doing, but you're man, I really should do that. The thing that stays on your to-do list for 3 days in a row because you keep putting things on top of it, like that's a thing that we should all be trying to really recognize in ourselves. Like, whoa, could I get an okay version of this done by AI quickly? And if so, great, because done is better than perfect. That being said, AI is like at best sycophantic, at worst like wrong about a lot of things. And so I think being willing to look at what's created and say, that's not good. What? And maybe that's just because it's not good for your local context. Maybe that's not good because you don't think it's the right thing. But actually looking for places where you, what I would call disagree with the GPT. Like where do you disagree? Those I would think are diamonds. Like I'd be very excited if you find places where you disagree, where your intuition is running contrary to whatever you're getting kind of back. I would be like, not just trust your intuition, but start to think really hard about, is that actually a differentiated point of view? Because what you're getting from the model is definitionally average. And so if you have a perspective that it feels wrong, that's a terrific thing, because it might actually be you might have actually happened upon something that you think differently about. And I think thinking differently is going to be really, really at a premium as we move forward. And so, just a very quick example of that is, when we started working with AIs, if you could go to ChatGPT today, you could say, I want to start a company, how do you think I should do it? It'll give you a bunch of things. I happen to think it's like a really okay but not great path to follow. I have a perspective that the path should be a little different. And the really easy version of that is, my version of it starts with writing down the name of the person that you're imagining as your first customer. That's where I start. So I just disagree with what it says as the thing. So I guess it's just to say I would really trust your intuition. If you're looking at it and you see a place where you think it's wrong or whatever, I would not trust that. And I definitely wouldn't trust, by the way, because if you haven't done this, you should do it. When you're talking to one of these AIs and it says something to you and you kind of feel it's a little off, just say, that doesn't sound right. And the unfortunate truth is it'll respond, you're totally right. Good call. I got that totally wrong. Or I don't know why that's the voice that I have adopted. But that's what it feels like, and it's wrong. And so.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. So thank you so much, Nicholas. Nicholas, I'll give you 30 seconds if you wanna, if you have any closing thoughts to summarize or.
No, it's just a total honor to be here, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I think everyone I've met is thinking about this topic so creatively, and I would certainly not say in a very advanced. At least from whatever my sample set is, in a very advanced way. And so it's just really, I'm very grateful to the U.S. Embassy for bringing me here, and very grateful for everyone who's here to have the chance to exchange ideas.
Thank you so much. And I honestly can't wait for the session to end, not because I'm done with it.
No, we got to go build history businesses.
Yeah, but because there's so I feel like we've learned so much today that I want to get out, and then I want to take notes. I want to start something, right? Because this conversation, I think, has been very information dense, which is a great thing, because I think per capita, how much information is generated in podcasts like these tends to be a little on the lower side. But I feel like today we've talked enough to build a few careers even. So thank you so much for the great advice, and I hope if there's one advice that people take away from Nicholas today, it's that making is thinking, right? And that done is better than perfect. So any entrepreneur who's out there who's thinking about using AI, doing something within the AI space, I think this is your recommendation from a very seasoned, very experienced entrepreneur, that we should just go out and do it. And so I'm very grateful to not just you, Nicholas, for giving us this insight, but for everyone that made it possible for us to hear this advice, right? So this of course goes out to the Bhutan Dialogues team, the Loden Foundation, and in the case of you, Nicholas, once again, I'm also thankful to the U.S. Embassy for bringing you here. Thank you so much. We do Bhutan Dialogues like this on a frequency about one a month. And every time we do a session like this, the sessions are always this information dense, and you'll always learn something from Bhutan Dialogues. So make sure to follow Loden Foundation on social media, and make sure to attend the next one as well. Thank you so much.